Good afternoon, everybody. We're a couple minutes away from starting the webinar. Just waiting for a few more people to sign on, and we'll get going at 1 o'clock. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I want to welcome you all to the Behavioral Assessments for Driver Safety webinar, hosted by TalentClick and ISB Me. We'll be getting started. Just to give a couple of quick introductions here and maybe some housekeeping as well. There is a chat function available in the webinar, so you can send your questions through. What we'll be doing is monitoring the questions throughout the webinar and then hopefully getting to all of them at the end and providing answers. The other thing I should mention is that we will be recording this webinar and making it available if you ever want to go back and use it as a reference. To start, I just want to thank you all for taking the time to join us today. My name is Charlie Charlambus, and I am the Director of Client Services for ISB Canada's ME division for making eligibility easy. I've had the pleasure of working with fleets, truck training schools, and insurance providers across Canada and the US. And one of the biggest things that always seems to come up is driver behavior. We all know there's a shortage out there of good qualified drivers in the industry, and to help manage this, ISB, Making Eligibility Easy, and TalentClick are very proud to talk to you today about the DSQ, Driver Safety Quotient, TransClick Behavioral Survey, and some of the results that we've seen from that. We'll help you learn a little bit more about the power of predictive analytics, which will also hopefully help you hire and train better drivers. With success in over 40 countries, a wide variety of leading companies such as Pacific Western Transportation, Challenger Motor Freight, and CN Rail use TalentClick's risk-based personality assessments to improve driver safety, decrease incidents, and help manage the recruitment and onboarding process. I'm going to introduce you shortly to Natalie, who's going to share some very insightful information on how or on what is behavioral risk, and we'll even share some interesting statistics from TalentClick's driver safety research. As I mentioned at the beginning, please feel free to type your questions in. We will be looking for them and addressing those at the end. But without any further delay, I'd like to introduce you to Natalie Suresafil. And I knew I was going to do that, Natalie. I apologize. But Natalie is a program director at TalentClick Workforce Solutions. She's a specialist in psychometric assessments and training programs. She holds a master's degree in occupational psychology. Her background is in human resources, training and development, organizational behavior, and disability management. She's been a trainer and consultant for a number of organizations in construction, mining, oil and gas, manufacturing, transportation, hospitality, and more. Throughout her career in education, she's published a number of articles on the subject of personality, safety management, and training in journals such as the American Infrastructure Magazine, Bloomberg News, Organizational Behavior, and Human Performance, as well as some others. She's a member of the British Psychology Association and the Michael Smith Foundation for Health Research, and has delivered customized training programs and workshops internationally. So please join me in welcoming Natalie to take you through this webinar today.
Thank you for the introduction, Charlie, and thank you all for joining us today from near and far. It's my pleasure to be speaking with you all today on the topic of driver safety and how to identify high-risk drivers. So the length of today's session will be about 30 minutes total, and there definitely will be some time towards the end of today's session for some Q&A. As Charlie said, we're going to be recording this session, so if anyone wants to hear it again or send it out to others who may be interested in the content that we share here with you, you'll definitely be able to do that. So please stay tuned for the recording sent to you by email sometime in the next 24 hours. So what are we going to be covering today? I'll start off with a background on TalentClick, so who we are, what we do. Then I'll get into a bit more detail around the link between personality and behavioral risk, and really how that might lead to incident causation. Then we'll get into some of the findings from our research that we've conducted, which essentially links specific personality areas to particular types of incidents and risks. So yeah, without further delay, I'll just dive right into that to be respectful of everyone's time. So who's TalentClick? We work with a variety of different safety-sensitive industries such as construction, oil and gas, manufacturing, transportation, amongst others. However, today we're going to be focused predominantly on transportation. So typically, the organizations that come to us, they really come to us to help them reduce the negative events in their organization, such as incidents, injuries, turnover, theft, poor hiring decisions. And really, we just help them by increasing the positive events in their organization, such as improving their overall safety culture, employee satisfaction, retention, productivity, and more. And the reason we do this and the reason we focus predominantly in the area of risk mitigation is because what we know, based not only on our research and our statistics, but decades of research that have been done in the field of incident causation and incident reduction, is that 1 out of 4 individuals, and let's speak specifically to drivers today, is deemed as being higher risk. Now, what that means is that 1 out of 4 drivers is more likely to be involved in a collision, a road rage incident, in violation of road rules. And these are predominantly, I'm going to say over 90% of the time, due to human factors such as distractibility, inattention, errors in judgment. So I want you guys to I'll take a few moments to think about times when you had a close call. It's often been because you or the other driver was experiencing one of those states and one of those conditions. So knowing that and thinking about some of these stats, here I'm just placing some stats that you'll see on screen here. You'll see that based on the numbers that we're seeing, it's at every 2 miles, the average driver makes about 400 observations, 40 decisions, and 1 mistake. Once every 500 miles, one of those mistakes leads to a near collision. And once every 61,000 miles, one of those mistakes leads to a crash. To mitigate risk, when we're talking about making a bad hiring decision, in the past, organizations have relied solely on background checks, reference checks, and these are all wonderful pieces of information. But the only problem with focusing solely on those bits of information is that they focus only on someone's past behaviors. So using those tools alone is kind of like driving by only looking into the rear view mirror. And this is often the problem that a lot of organizations deal with. So we know what someone looks like who's a bad hire, and that often doesn't come to light after the fact, so once they've already been hired. But imagine you had a tool that could help you predict, okay, what's this person going to be like once they've passed a probationary period, or once they're working in a fashion where they're not always supervised. So you can actually gain more insight to uncover, okay, who are the types of people and employees that are going to be more likely to speed, or who are going to be the ones who would likely fail to wear their seat belts or engage in aggressive driving, for instance. So like I said, the trouble is we often don't uncover this information until after the fact. And so, imagine if you knew this beforehand so that you could make effective hiring decisions, or say you already have this person working on your team, how can we empower this individual in effect of their personality to make better decisions? So offer them with personalized coaching that really reflects them and their natural work styles. So that's really why we put the focus on predicting future behaviors, because when you have the opportunity to predict what someone's future behaviors are going to be like, you can be proactive about mitigating and managing that level of risk. And so that's why more and more organizations and Fortune 500 companies are focusing on personality tools as a predictive tool, because they work. They give you that incremental gain and that insight into how people are likely going to behave in the future on the job. So how do we do that? How do we measure that? How it works is pretty simple. Candidates and employees would take a 10 to 15-minute online questionnaire that can be taken essentially anywhere that you've got an internet connection. So whether it's on your smartphone, tablet, on your desktop. The questionnaire is also offered in a variety of different languages. We're constantly adding languages to our library and our database, so we actually now offer it in over 20 different languages, and if there's special requests for certain languages and dialects, we definitely do offer those as well. So once someone goes through our questionnaire, we have the capacity to generate a variety of different pieces of information. The one we'll focus on specifically today will be the driver safety quotient, the DSQ. So the DSQ is really intended for employees who drive motor vehicles or operate heavy machinery as part of their occupation. So here we're talking about short haul, long haul vehicles, and even heavy equipment machinery such as cranes, forklift, dozers, and excavators. And you know, this is great for industries who are involved in transportation of goods via either road, rail, air, or sea as well. So really what you get once someone goes through the questionnaire is a snapshot into someone's safety strengths and their potential risk areas as a driver. It also provides the employer or the hiring manager with interview questions that are targeted specifically towards how the individual scored. So here the employer really has that power to have guided interviews which help probe into potential areas of concern for that individual and asking them questions that will help highlight, okay, is this person self-aware? What are the areas that I might need to invest some of my intention and training into as a leader and supervisor to this individual? So as you'll see here, the reports we focus on 6 core personality areas that have been strongly linked to incident causation for drivers. And within the reports, you've got insight into, okay, how, what are this individual's strengths, what are their potential areas for concern, and how can I manage that? How can I be a powerful and effective coach to this employee? So now I'd like to emphasize also that, you know, there's not a right or wrong personality or good or bad here. It's just about understanding a person's fit and understanding how their characteristics apply to how they might navigate in different types of environments and how that might influence and affect their propensity towards risk. So what we're actually going to do now is we're going to get into the dimensions briefly. We're going to cover them one by one and understand what they mean. And so I'll start off with an example. So one thing that we've found from working and doing the comparison between short haul and long haul drivers is that different levels of distractibility can actually be beneficial to your role from a safety perspective. Now that might sound a bit obscure, but I will get into that in a bit more detail as we get into discussing some of the findings from our research. Similarly, when we're talking about fit here, having different personality types fit within different roles and having different characteristics that complement a given position, we found that also with organizations that have a lot of scaffolding roles. So we've actually found that, for instance, the ideal scaffolder is actually highly thrill-seeking, but also cautious. Now, what that means is that as a scaffolder, the ideal profile would display someone who's comfortable with a certain level of risk-taking and uncertainty, but these risks and the actions that they're taking are actually well calculated and diligent. So, and the level of risk that they're taking are well thought out because they are actually taking the time to rely on their skills, their training, and their education to make proper judgment calls. So a similar thing can be applied to someone who's a long haul driver versus a short haul long driver. Different levels of distractibility are tolerated because your environment is going to vary in effect of the risk that is tolerable. So let's get into the dimensions one by one. The first thing we measure is someone's level of rule resistance and versus how accommodating they might be. So this area looks at the degree to which a person accepts rules, procedures, and their openness to change. Our research in the transportation industry over the past year has actually pointed to rule-resistant drivers having more at-fault crashes. So what we saw is that drivers who scored high on rule resistance had a crash rate that was 1.5 times higher than others. So 53% higher crash rate here. Similar research was found in the oil and gas industry, where we saw that foremen with a higher scores on the resistance scale had crews with incident rates that were 2.5 times higher. The next dimension that we look at is anxious versus calm. This is all about how a person responds and reacts to stress and pressure. Anxious people might tend to panic and freeze in certain unpredictable situations, whereas calm people are able to remain calm and think clearly, even in unpredictable situations. The next area we look at is impatient versus patient. This is all about a person's level of emotional control and how easily they become excitable and agitated. We found that drivers and workers with higher impatience scores are more likely to become confrontational and either physically or verbally aggressive with drivers and workers. The next scale we look at is distractible versus focused. This is all about a person's level of variety seeking and their need for stimulation. So relating this back to the example of short haul versus long haul drivers, as I alluded to earlier, as a short haul driver, you're often driving in cities where there are more distractions and you're having to accommodate your changing environment and navigate it through it safely. Therefore, having a strong ability to handle frequent distractions and be more equipped to do so is valuable, to be a little bit more on the distractibility side, because it means that you're able to accommodate distractions. You're able to perceive different levels of distractions and things getting thrown at you left field without potentially becoming overwhelmed. Whereas for a longer haul driver, for example, this skill of handling frequent changes might not be as important as having the ability to remain focused for long periods and long stretches of time without becoming distracted or seeking variety while you're driving on highways and long stretch roads. So in summary, at being a long haul driver, it's better to be more on the focused side, highly on the focused side, whereas being a short haul driver, being a little bit towards the distractible isn't too bad. It just means that you're able to handle a certain level of distraction, which the city might be providing you with anyways. So what we found here in our studies is that this is a study that we did in 2017 last year. So drivers with high distractibility scores had 3.9 times higher rate of traffic tickets and traffic violations. So that's almost 300% higher. The next dimension we look at is impulsive versus cautious. This area looks at a person's level of consideration when they're making decisions. And it really looks at, okay, are they quick decision makers, or do they tend to carefully evaluate things before making a judgment call? So for instance, our studies of working with construction companies have shown a strong correlation between near misses and first aid incidents, with being highly on the impulsive side. We've found similar things in the transportation industry as well. In transportation, drivers with a high level of impulsivity were prone to at-fault crashes. That was a strong correlation there. The next dimension we look at is thrill-seeking versus apprehensive, and this is all about the degree to which a person is comfortable with risk and uncertainty. Like I said earlier, in certain roles like scaffolders, you would require a person to be a certain level of thrill-seeking to be successful in their role. When we're taking this back to the transportation industry, we've seen that ice road truckers or logging truckers or first responders, firemen and paramedics, people who operate heavy machinery and vehicles as part of their occupation in a kind of more stressful, safety-averse environment, a certain level of thrill-seeking is actually required for them to be successful within their roles. So in our work with those higher risk conditions and environments like ice road truckers and logging truckers, we have seen a higher level of thrill-seekingness, and we've seen how this has actually been beneficial for the role. That in conjunction with them being more on the cautious side, as per measured in our previous dimension that we look at, the thrill-seeking and cautious dimension in conjunction with each other yield to a person who's comfortable with a certain level of risk and uncertainty, but who is going to be smart, calculated in how they do that because they're relying on their skills and their training to make these guided decisions. So like I said earlier, in 2017, we partnered with a number of transportation companies to determine which personality characteristics are linked to things like road safety outcomes, such as at-fault collisions, moving violations, property damage, injuries, and fatalities. And really our purpose in doing so was really to help leaders in the transportation industry reduce their incident rates by taking a more forward-thinking approach and a data-driven approach. So we really wanted to provide these forward-thinking leaders with predictive analytics to help them reach notable improvements in not only lowering their safety records, but also reducing their insurance premiums and identifying, okay, what does a lower risk profile look like, so that we can take this intelligence to help us hire and make placements more effectively, but also so that we could coach, train, and develop safer drivers. So, you know, amongst those positive objectives that we were hoping to support the transportation industry achieve is reducing things like crashes, property damage, and of course, you know, helping them save money and corporate profitability as well. So some of the findings that we came up with through the data that we gathered is we were actually able to link certain personality traits to elevated frequencies of traffic violations, crashes, and equipment damage. And we also looked at telematics data to help observe things like lane handling, acceleration, speeding, and cornering. And through our studies and data analysis, what we found is the link between at-fault crashes and roll resistance. So what we saw, and I did mention this a little earlier, is the strong link between higher roll resistance scores and having higher at-fault crashes. We also saw this similar link between being highly impulsive and how that might translate to at-fault crashes as well. So employees and drivers with a higher level of impulsivity had 68% more, a higher crash rate than people who are more on the cautious side. We also observed the link between traffic violations and being highly distractible. So drivers with high distractibility scores had 3.9 times higher rates of past violations, almost 300% higher. We also observed the link between equipment damage, machinery damage, vehicle damage, and someone's level of distractibility and impulsivity. This here is actually a scatter plot graph. It's used for group analytics, and each dot represents an individual score. And this is actually really interesting and fascinating information for leaders and supervisors because it helps them better understand their teams and how their different teams and departments might vary. It's a great way to slice and dice data, and it helps identify patterns and trends to support decisions around hiring, training, and coaching. So as we've said before, you know, we've seen here through our findings what a major contributor personality is to fit, and how personality is both predictable and measurable, and it's an easy way to measure. So with these findings that you know we're getting based on transportation industries, these findings have really helped these industries make stronger data-driven hiring decisions, and also has provided them with a personalized tool to help guide employees through effective coaching and training, and really guide drivers towards safer behaviors and outcomes. Here on screen is just some of the examples of the notable improvements that we've helped the organizations we work with achieve. So whether it's been through incident reduction, employee turnover, and just overall improving the quality of hires, these are the areas that we thrive and shine in. So lots of great stuff to talk about. And I see here that I'm coming to the end of my time, and I'd love to leave the next little while open for some questions and comments. So thanks to you all for listening. We're going to leave the next few moments open to some Q&A, and I'll hand things over to Charlie again to help guide that. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Natalie. Great information. I've seen this a few times now, and every time I watch it, I learn something new from you. So thank you very much for walking everybody through that. We do have a couple questions that have already come through. If you have a question, please feel free to type it into the chat box if you haven't so far. But Natalie, the first question that came through here asks, can we create a specific ideal score range for our company based on our top performers? And can this be used to determine the profile of my top performers?
Definitely. So that's a really great question. So if you've got some star drivers on your team, first of all, we have a library of ideals for ranges and benchmarks for successful different types of operators and drivers. But we can definitely make this specific to your organization as well. So say, for instance, you've identified who the ideal performers are in your organization, and you thought to yourself, okay, I wish I could just hire more people like the Johns and Marys and Joes in my company. We could help identify and help you uncover, okay, what is it about this person that makes them great at what they do? What kind of personality do they have? What type of traits do they possess? So we can help you identify these benchmarks so that you could hire more ideal performers.
Perfect. And one more. So you mentioned different languages. Do you offer the assessments and reports in Punjabi?
Yes, we do. We offer the assessment in Punjabi as well as other dialects spoken in India and in the Punjab region.
So, I believe you mentioned it, Natalie, but just to clarify and follow up on that one, how many total languages is the DSQ report available in?
So the assessment can be taken in over 20 different languages right now. But as of right now, the actual report that the employer would get, we offer that in 5 different languages. So there's English, Spanish, Punjabi, Hindi, and Portuguese. But if you want the actual physical report offered in different languages, we can definitely have that sorted as well. Typically, employers really just want the assessment taker to be able to take the tool in their primary language. And a lot of the times the employers and hiring managers are comfortable with English and those core languages that we already offer it in. However, if there's other specifications with regards to language that you're looking for, we can typically get that operational within 4 to 6 weeks for you.
Perfect. And looking at the time, that kind of brings us to the end. So I do want to say just a couple of last closing remarks, if that's okay. Natalie's put up both of our contact information on the slide there. Again, this will be sent out, so it will be available to you, but please feel free to reach out to Natalie if you're interested in learning more about the different studies that they do or the different reports they offer. If you want to know more about the ME program, of which the DSQ is a part of our driver package, please feel free to reach out to myself. Natalie, on behalf of all of us here at ME, I just want to thank you again for facilitating this webinar. I think you did a great job with a lot of really good information.
Thanks so much, and thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right, so I guess that brings us to the end. So thank you very much for everybody for taking the time out of your day to join us, and you will be seeing a copy of the recorded webinar sent to you in the next 24 hours. So thanks again, and please let us know if you have any questions.